Mark, have you prepared a whole bunch of poems to read?
Did I bring a bunch of poems to read?
Yes.
Yes, I have two of my recent chapbooks today. This one is Winter Storm Warning, and this is the one I'm going to be focusing on. I finished that early this year, and at that time I was stuck in Silver City, New Mexico, much longer than I had expected because I had some legal problems. I had bought a truck, but I could not get the title to that truck. The dealer didn't have it. And in New Mexico, you only have 30 days to register your truck after you buy it. And the dealer wasn't in New Mexico. The dealer was in El Paso. And in Texas, you get 60 days. So it took me much longer than I anticipated. And so while I was stuck in Silver City, a whole bunch of poems came to me. And so this is my most recent chapbook called While Following the Shaman's Smoke. And there's a couple of Earth Day kind of connected things there that I thought I might close with. So I've got plenty of ammunition if you guys have the tolerance to listen to me this evening.
What is a chapbook?
A chapbook is a term that goes back to the late early 1800s, and it originally meant a really cheaply produced something just a little bit bigger than a pamphlet that you could buy very cheaply. And it now is used for small books of poetry, often privately published. But the word's been around for a couple hundred years.
Okay.
Well, Mark, I think we can go ahead and get started. I think there's still a few more people who might be checking in as we do our thing, but I can just check them in as they arrive and they all figure out what's going on. Most of you, thank you so much for doing this, first and foremost. This is a brand new world. We'll see how this works. I was so excited. Well, excited might not be the right word. It was very fortuitous that the artist that we had scheduled for this month's gathering was a poet. If anything was going to lend itself to the Zoom gathering, this was going to be it. And then when Mark was so willing to come into this new genre and see if we could make it work, I couldn't be more appreciative of that. I'm sad we can't be together. I really look forward to these gatherings every month and spending some time getting to know you as artists and friends. But this will work for now, and we're much safer for it. I think I've said it to most of you. You were muted when you came into the call. You've probably unmuted yourself now, so you might want to mute again once Mark starts to read so that we don't interrupt with background noise and all that sort of thing. All you do to unmute is click the little microphone in the corner, and we will have questions in the middle. So the format we have set is Mark will read for a little bit from one of his recent works, like he was just talking about. Then we'll take a small break for questions, comments, conversation, like we would during a normal, regular gathering. And then he'll close out with some Earth Day poems. This is my cat. He will leave here shortly. So we're really excited about the format. I was going to do a more formal introduction, but I think most of you know Mark pretty well from what I've been picking up from the chatter. And then I don't have to say his last name if I don't get formal about it. Although I think I could now. I'm close. Again, Mark, thank you so much for trying something new with us. We're really excited to hear from you, and I'm not going to waste any more of your time. So please.
Okay, well, thank you very much. ACAC is a marvelous organization, and you guys do so much for the arts community in Ames. I've been connected first through my late wife, Sherry, who was Town and Gown's ACAC representative for many, many years. And I've been a member of ACAC myself for a number of years and have loved going to the artists' gatherings. In addition to poetry, occasionally I get involved with some visual arts and photography, and it's a wonderful organization. And I really love Morning Bell Coffee too, and we were planning on Earth Day having a physical gathering at Nadav's place, and I'm sorry he can't be here so that I could thank him again for offering to open up his shop for us for this event. But thanks to Jennifer and her ability to manage Zoom, we've got a way that at least we can gather virtually. And so I will be sharing with you probably, we'll see how long it takes to get through this, but most of the poems in Winter Storm Warning. I really want to focus on that today because of my personal situation. My father, who turned 90 last month, slipped and fell Saturday morning, and unfortunately it led to a massive brain bleed, and he was just entered into inpatient hospice care this afternoon. And so mortality's really been on my mind, and I've been trying to arrange a lot of the care stuff from here, but he lives in Illinois, and tomorrow morning I'm going to be hitting the road east. It's a little scary, but my mom and my sister and my dad, I think, need me, and I want to be there, and so I'm going to make that trip tomorrow. So the fact that this collection of poems focused on mortality came about because two of my friends last year very unexpectedly passed away. And they're featured in a couple of the poems here. And also the little quote that Jennifer gave you is sort of the way, the little statement that I have at the start of the book. It was just a line that came to me that didn't really fit as a poem, but I think it sort of gets at the spirit of the book. It's called "Wrapped Around a Barkless Branch, Poetry is a Beautiful Snake, Waiting for the Right Moment to Strike." Okay. I didn't realize, I hadn't read through this, I didn't realize how perfectly timed this is in a way. It's called "Unwinding." With darkness, the melting snow morphs into fog, a thickening fog that slowly obscures a rising moon, catching the pinkish glow of distant towns. A tired year unwinds as the black soil rests, as roots and worms rest in it, as the creek flows slowly through it, under thin ice, with torpid fish unaware of calendars, in a patient land where this year began with the return of the rolling thunder. And then the namesake of the book, Winter Storm Warning. The branches are commanded to dance, but not by joy this late November morning. They all comply without complaint, but for their leader gripped so tightly in a merlin's talons. Unfazed, it stares toward the eastern horizon, where 9 pigeons circle, back to their usual spot on a high-tension line. And that poem came to me very quickly as I entered Interstate 35 heading north, right at the 13th Street ramp. The merlin was perched right next to me and the pigeons were off to the east. Realization 6. After listening to the Goldfinch radio, I turn it off and pull out my pen, but hesitate. The heartaches exposed by the relentless passage of time erode not to words, but to the shifting sands that drift and pile, waiting for my tears to fall, to shape that silent landscape of once forgotten things and lost love. For many years, I've been one of Ruth Ann's students at Ames Yoga Center. And this was something that I experienced in yoga class up on Main Street. It's called Last Class of the Year, and it's dedicated to Ruth Ann. As our class nears its close, we sit in Burmese, our backs to an accepting wall. I open my eyes just in time to see our teacher slip her hands back into the long sleeves of her sweatshirt. Then the burner ignites and the furnace fan kicks in. Maybe I should preface this by saying that elk is my totem and has played a very important role in my spiritual life. And so there's an elk reference in here. It's called Reunions. Sometimes a door bugles as it closes. You never know when you'll meet up with your teachers. They might just be watching your back. Has it been too long since we said hello? So much has changed, even in the city graveyard. A broken branch waves in the wind. And this is something I experienced on Highway 30 between here and Cedar Rapids a few months ago. It's called road widening. A demolished barn burns, exclaiming smoke at the right-of-way's edge, soon swept into the bucket of ashes. New scars nowhere near healed. A bridge crosses alluvium brooding, disquieted, as the kestrel's tail flicks. Under the tracks, and this would have been on, let's see, North Dakota, right where it crosses underneath the railroad tracks. Heading south past the underpass, teen suicide on the radio. A girl cries out for her lost friend. A shattered song dog sings no more. And this is about one of my cousins and his wife. It's called Retirement. After too many miles and surgeries too many to mention, they search for a home for their tired dreams, rooms for worn quilts with frayed edges, a love that endures blood-broken hearts. Third night of the bare moon. The town sleeps beneath corrugated strips of gray with nothing stirring till the rumble of a garbage truck punctuated by its squeals and thuds. Patchy snow is not enough to blanket the worn-out lawns. A few tired angels and stray glitter are all that remain after the truck passes, and cardinals hidden in the spruces. It won't be long till they start chipping to let each other know they've made it through another night. The next two are two parts to Heading West After the Ritual. One, he looked back upon banded verga curtains blushed in rouge, knowing that was where his ancestors lie buried. He was of one mind, with mixed blood in his veins, and a confused soul, so many of them holding to a faith rejected by the others, all bound together by a single moist strand of love. And two, once he reached the big river and crossed the high bridge, a rain began to fall. You might call it a cleansing rain, but it fostered a mold on the late-standing crops, still waiting for the low-piercing sun of freeze-dried days to save them. And this next one is one of the memorial poems to a young woman who was a botany student down in Silver City, New Mexico, who had a mysterious death out of state. evidently a car accident, and it took a very long time to get the news back to Silver City. It's called Deep Sky Dreamer, and I started with a short quote from a poem called Expectation by the contemporary Chinese poet Bei Dao. No tame deer roam the wilderness of dreams. Deep Sky Dreamer. Deep Sky Dreamer, mystery seeker, budding herbalist, dancer with dangerous partners who cut your storied skin with their jagged teeth. Did you throw all caution to the wind when you escaped? Or, in the end, was that wind just too savage for those translucent walls you hoped to build to bear? That afternoon you came to gather the lotus young and lithe, yet pulling me back to old tragedy and a fragile friend. But I never thought your dreams would end this way. This takes place in Ines Grove Park, back, one of the winter snows, maybe in December, maybe right after I got back from Silver City. I don't know. I think it was probably earlier. It's called Long Embraces. The buck fought the young ironwood and clearly won. All around it, the white oak leaves sleep, upside down, curled in long embraces. They're wet, but the trail here hasn't yet thawed. Above this ravine, I stopped to speak in low tones, heard by the squirrels and the red-bellied, and maybe by the stones jutting from the loam that no longer roll, with their emerald patches of moss and bright crystals of half-melted snow. Next one is a sunny Silver City poem, my home down in New Mexico. It's called House Cleaning, and it was when I got back to the house in January. House cleaning. After a long absence, I returned to the house and the scattered remains of small creatures. During the night, the lizard disappears. The next day, in the warmth of the afternoon sun, 2 black wasps revive. I take them on a white towel to the sunny patio. They don't seem to mind what the night will bring. Realization 7. Given the way things turned out, you might question why I still carry her smooth stones of reassurance. Don't forget, when you say that someone's going the wrong way, you're assuming that they're seeking a certain destination. This next one really doesn't have to do a whole lot with mortality, but it's a very long ago memory from back in 1975 from a little adventure I had. It's called From Sarnia. Half asleep in the cold and dark, boarding a noisy train for Toronto. After London, a light lunch, hard-boiled egg on my salad. The Royal York only to be seen past maroon streetcars and chestnut vendors on crowded sidewalks with clouds of sweet earthy steam. Decorations going up at Simpson Sears and the Bay. Then chasing after an early sunset, uneasy dozing on that noisy train. Meditation 25. It took the form of a copper-colored spider mum, larger than you'd first imagine, radiant, wavering, but always returning. It took me in, or I took it in. It doesn't matter, we are one. The door is open a crack. It seems dark. It swings open. And then for my friend Chad Finn, who was one of the best blackberry breeders in the United States, and a big bear of a man who lived life to the fullest. He came in to do his doctorate at the University of Minnesota right after I left. His major professor was a good friend and fellow graduate student of mine. Chad went out on a little vacation to Hawaii and was out surfing. and a huge wave met up with him. And although he survived the collision, he was paralyzed from the neck down and had his wits about him and basically said, turn off all the machines, I can't handle that. So this next two poems are for Chad in different ways. This was grappling with the news of his passing. It's called Blessings in Memory of Chad Finn. And then I have one more, which is sort of a follow-up to it. Last night, once Venus had set, Johnny's band played some slow dances under the waning moon. When they were all through and all packed up, Bear and I walked over to the cedar smoke for a final blessing, but the winds had blown it out. I was surprised, but Bear reminded me that we bathed in the smoke while we danced. And then at the beginning of the year, there are monthly gatherings down in Des Moines of a group called Dances of Universal Peace. I don't know if any of you have ever had, I know Deb has had interactions with the dances, but at the beginning of the year, they have a special ceremony to mark the year and to sort of release old thoughts and begin anew. And there's a labyrinth with a basket of seeds in the middle of the labyrinth. And as I came out of the labyrinth, this poem came to me, and it's also processing Chad's passing. It's entitled Beyond Soap Creek. Soap Creek is just north of Corvallis, Oregon, and that's where Chad and his wife had their home. Beyond Soap Creek. Way past the sunset, a hazel stands in the middle of a complicated forest. It took a long, long time for the grieving stag to wander there. It was already January, and hard to believe, but the jays and squirrels hadn't hidden all its nuts. The stag sniffed one, dangling out over the trail, and bit into it. Its crisp, sweet meat went straight into his heart. You know, it won't be long now. The hazel's the first to bloom. So that pretty well gets us through winter storm warning, and I guess we definitely have some time to work with. So perhaps if Jennifer'd like to unmute folks, we could take this opportunity for some questions or just general discussion and socializing for a bit.
I've got myself unmuted. I think you can all unmute yourselves.
Great.
Mark,
Yes.
how did the elk become your totem?
That's a very long story. There's many different ways that I could approach that. I'll do it very simply to say that early in my relationship with my wife, a small herd of elk were very helpful to me in some of the arrangements that her family was doing in getting ready for the wedding. I grew up very close to Elk Grove Township in Illinois, which has had a captive herd of elk since the 1920s. But more directly answering your question, about a month before I lost my wife to cancer, I had a vision. An elk walked into my bedroom before I was trying to fall asleep and gave me very profound information that convinced me that it would be a good idea for elk to be my teacher. And I have studied elk on many different levels, spiritually and biologically, ever since that vision, which to me was, you know, approaching the world from a scientific perspective. Having something like that happen was really hard to process. And ultimately kind of life-changing.
Thank you.
Mark, you often say that the poem comes to you at a particular time. Now, I'm not a writer, so this might be a ridiculous question, but how fully formed are your ideas when you put pen to paper that first time?
Extremely. I have a rule that I bend on rare occasions, but I would say my rule is that if a poem hasn't come together within an hour, I throw it away.
Oh.
And so I would say about more than 90% of the poems that I put together come much faster than an hour. And so many of my poet friends edit and they rework their stuff, and they're trying for perfection. I think that they're trying to capture just the right words. And for me, I wasn't a poet. The poems started coming to me after I lost my wife to cancer. And it's been a very spontaneous process. And yeah, there are rare occasions, especially on some of the really long things that I've written, where I've had to work on them. But like everything that I've shared with you today was the sort of thing that I just have to, if I'm driving, I just have to stop the car and get it down. And I might make a misspelling or, you know, something where I edit like that. But no, it's a very spontaneous thing. And like I said, I have a rule. If it hasn't come together in an hour, if it's sort of hanging there, it's gone.
Interesting.
Mark,
Yes.
I'm wondering if that's true with your phrasing. Your poems just seem to flow. There's a very nice cadence that's aided by the way you read them, by the way, too. But I'm just wondering, do you have to work on that phrasing, that flow, or does that just kind of come naturally as well?
Okay, that's an interesting question. I think that the poems tend to come to me in a natural voice. And so it's usually very easy to read them. Obviously, words don't flow with punctuation and line breaks. And so that is something that sometimes I don't like. As I develop these chapbooks, I read the poems out loud to myself a fair amount. And if there's something I'm stumbling over, I change the line break or I change the punctuation. I typically don't change the words, but I do try to make it so that it's easy for me to share them aloud. To me, poetry, you know, when I read other poets, I really like to read it aloud, and the poets that I can read easily aloud probably resonate better with me. And yet, sometimes I've gone and listened to other poets read their own stuff, and it's like, oh wow, I love it when they read it, but I stumble over it when I read theirs. So it just, we all have different ways of expressing, but yeah, sometimes I do find that it's hard for me to, like, if I let something, you know, I've written it down and then I come back to it a week later and I pick it up as it was written, I'm like, it's not flowing quite right. So yeah, sometimes I'll like change a line break or add a punctuation mark or something.
So Mark, thank you for sticking around maybe to do this for us before going off to see your family.
You're welcome.
Your poems are very efficient. They're very clear, and in so many senses, you know, they touch on so many senses. Do you pick the theme and then you think about poems to go with that? Or do you have a huge fund of poetry that you take from for your chapbook?
Yes. It's a combination of both, I think. I don't know an exact number, but since the summer of 2011, I'm guessing maybe 2,000, 2,500 poems, something like that.
Okay.
And sometimes early on, I'll get an idea for a theme for a chapbook. And then it's really interesting. Somehow it's working with my subconscious. And poems will flow more related to that topic to a certain extent.
Okay.
But there's also many poems that I don't see fitting in. And I have like just a file called Poems Waiting for a Chapbook kind of a thing. So there's a reserve there that if I get a different idea to organize a book, I go back and I look at things that never got placed. I do view the making of the chapbooks as a very different process. It's not a spontaneous process. I commission a fair amount of art for my chapbooks. I'm really into paper and fonts, and I do all my own layout. I have a great relationship with Corey Hoyce and Adam Lane over there at Hoyce Printing. They do all my printing. And typically, unless a project's really expensive, I give all my books away. I don't like to sell things. I feel like this is sort of a gift in a way. I don't know. And so I'm not in the business of selling poetry. I don't ever look to like having other people publish my stuff. I have a small circle of friends and family that I give these books to. And I have done a few larger projects that are very different. I did one where I translated into English all of Vasco Popa's wolf poems. And I reframed them out of Serbian into English and then reframed them so that they were all told through the eyes of a wolf. And that was a very different project. And that book I actually sold at cost. And then I also produced a book of about 100 centos that all deal with elk. And centos, you don't write centos, you weave centos. Every line in a cento is borrowed from a past poet. You lift, it's all plagiarism. You lift lines from old poetry and reweave it together to make something completely different. And so Patchwork Elk was a year-long project that I did where I wove elk centos. So those kinds of projects are a little different, but it's really fun. I've sort of been, my eyes have been open to a world of literature that as a scientist, I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to.
Mark, you've also had some collaborative projects.
Yes. Including with you.
What's that?
Including with you.
Oh, yeah. And how hard is it to, when those of us who are collaborating with you have a little different style and all, do you sometimes have to scratch your head or
I've learned a lot. You know, there was one book in particular that Deb's talking about. It's called What We Need. And every poem in that book was a collaboration that I did with another poet. And we had different models for doing those collaborations. And those also weren't as spontaneous for me. And they definitely, the people that I was working with typically didn't work in a very spontaneous fashion either. And not all the collaborations worked. For various reasons, they didn't all come together. But enough of them did that we put together a book, and it was a fascinating learning experience for me. I got to know about 20 poets a lot better than I had before.
Mark, it's Kathy.
Yeah, hi, Kathy.
I just want to say I just really enjoyed your poems, but I thought the ones to your friend Chad were just especially touching. I really, really liked those.
Thank you very much. It was a huge shock to me to lose Chad, and yet I knew how he lived life. I knew how he approached things, and it all sort of made sense. And yet, you know, Chad especially being younger than me, and I rely on him for certain kinds of information that I use in my research. And then all of a sudden I get this news and it's like, what? And we're all pulling for him. And then, within 48 hours, he's no longer there. And that was really hard.
It must have been, but your remembrances, your poems really are a very nice tribute to him.
Thank you, and I was glad that I was able to share them with his family. I sent them a copy of this book, and they shared those poems among, you know, they had a family gathering where they shared those poems, and I was glad that I could do that. Yeah, his wife was also a University of Minnesota horticulture grad, so there's a lot of connections there.
That's neat.
Mark, this is Anna McCracken.
Hi.
Hi. So you answered my question because I was sitting here Googling you while you were reading, and I couldn't find you.
Okay.
So, well, I found you on the announcement, but because I was looking for your books to see, you know, how someone could buy them. But you said you print for friends and family.
Yes.
So I'm curious, where did you study? Did you study to become a poet, or did you use this all self-interest that you know?
It's all self-interest. I have no background in English or literature. I have pretty much all my adult life I've read poetry. I would say both Sandberg and Cummings, I've read their complete works multiple times over the years. And Vasco Popa, I'm a huge fan of. I mean, there's certain people that I've read a lot over the years. And I'm sure that's had some influence. I should say this, if you're interested in my poetry, like I said, I share it freely. And what I've done is if you go to the Iowa State University Digital Repository and search on me, you will find 4 extensive collections of my poetry that are just freely available as ebooks. So if you like what you hear and you want more, I am really indebted to Harrison Inafuku over at Parks Library. Harrison has been a wonderful resource and has worked with me to put up things on the digital repository.
What's Harrison's last name?
Inafuku, I-N-E-F-U-K-U.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, Kathy. Well, maybe not. I saw Kathy light up there for a second. Do you guys want to close with a couple Earth Day more oriented poems?
Sure.
That'd be great.
That sounds great, Mark.
Okay. So these are from While Following the Shaman's Smoke. And how are we doing on time? Okay. Well, we definitely have time for those two. I'm wondering if there's anything else that might be kind of fun in here. Oh, there's one. Okay. I'm going to shift gears and throw one more in since we got a little time. There was the reference to the smashed song dog over at the underpass on North Dakota. Every one of my chapbooks, I always make some reference to Coyote. And Coyote is the trickster. Coyote makes all sorts of things happen in America. And I don't like to have a chapbook together without some way of sneaking in Coyote. And sometimes it's very obvious and sometimes it's very subtle. So I'm going to start with a Coyote poem from While Following the Shaman's Smoke. It's called Nothing Amiss Behind the Catholic Cemetery. I sat by the chain-link fence, waiting for a coyote to come and sharpen her claws, having received reliable information regarding her whereabouts. A road crew sawed into the concrete across from the graveyard, unsettling the bones of uneasy lovers and plastic bouquets. A sheriff's deputy pulled over and got out to investigate, but found nothing amiss. That coyote never showed up. The next one is called Dawn, and it has 2 parts. And these are scenes that One's very close to my house down in New Mexico, and the other one's just a few miles away. Dawn. It's nearly dawn. 34 degrees. Those yapping dogs suddenly cease. Were they let back in, or did the object of their attention slip away into cold shadows? The dry air will warm fast. The quail awaken. They emerge, shuffling into bright rays. The spirits of this place are now illuminated, nodding knowingly at the passing covey, but siding with the fox's stealth. And part 2. South of where the roads run out, cranes take to a still sky proclaiming existence. The white-faced cattle have heard it all before. They look down and around to make sure the herd's all there. The pronghorns start running, long shadowed across the plain, kicking up their own wind, some leaping for all their worth, wanting to fly. And then the last one that I'd like to close with, I think it's really appropriate in a lot of different levels for where we are right now. It's called persistence. The other birds grasp the metal frame in their small feet and peck at the block of suet and seed as it sways. But the warbler perches beneath it, taking one small flight after the next, over and over, exposing his golden spot amidst black branches and the flutter of wings, touching his tiny sharp beak to the fat that sustains him. And I'm really, really grateful that we have the community that we have here, that we can be together and sustain each other through these rather difficult times. And I'm really grateful for all of you joining in tonight and doing this virtual gathering of artists. And I think with that, we should just do a little bit of virtual socializing here. That's usually what happens at the gatherings, and then people look at the visual art that the artist has produced.
Hey, Mark, this is Anna again. I'm sitting in Angel Fire, New Mexico. So you keep talking about New Mexico. I'm sorry I interrupted the class.
Oh.
Well, and I think that's the neat thing. I mean, you can, if we do them virtually, you can come from anywhere.
Where is Angel Fire?
So I'm north of Las Vegas, or, we're just east of Taos.
Okay. I've never been to Taos, but I love the Plaza Hotel in Las Vegas.
Oh, me too.
That is an amazing place. It was built in the 1880s, and it's been lovingly restored, and the staff there are just incredible. And they have a great bar and a great restaurant, and it's right on the Old Town Square. So yeah, that's a neat area. I like to stop there. Sometimes I have to drive back and forth. And I take it you have a presence in Ames as well, Anna?
Yeah, I live in Ames, and I drive back and forth all the time. But the TV show Longmire was filmed right next to the hotel there. So if you're in a new TV show, or it's old, not on anymore, Longmire was filmed in this area right around in here. So
Cool.
Where are you from originally?
I grew up on one of the flight paths to O'Hare Airport. And I was just barely in Wheeling Township. About 4 doors down was the line for Elk Grove Township, but about 10 miles north of O'Hare Airport. And when I was a kid, there were still truck farms, lots of empty lots. It was a very different world than it is now. I left there for the last time when I was 19. And I've never lived there again and have no desire to. I've lived all around the Midwest, but since 1983, I've been here in Ames. And now for the last 4 years, I also have a getaway home down in New Mexico.
And both of you have New Mexico ties. What drew you to New Mexico? Both of you,
you wanna
Mark
start?
and Anna.
Go ahead.
My husband came with the property. So it's not, it's a place that's taken me a good chunk of time to learn to love. I'm more of a Great Plains, Midwest gal. So we're serious high altitude for me. We're at 9,000 feet. So it's a challenging place for me to live, but he loves it here. So we come here because he likes it, and it's pretty. It's very pretty.
I had not spent hardly any time in New Mexico, and about 6 months after I lost my wife, I retired from federal service, and I was looking for just a place to have a little getaway, and I found a place called Bear Mountain Lodge, which was an old guest ranch that for a number of years the Nature Conservancy managed, and then they sold to a group of artists. And I found this online, and I thought, that sounds like it might be a good place to get away and do a little retreat. And I'd never been down to that area before. It's just on the edge of Silver City. It's at about 6,200 feet. It was just a beautiful place, and the people at the lodge were extremely welcoming. And so for a number of years, I would just go down there and stay in one particular room at the lodge and just had a very nice time. And then a few years back, I fell head over heels in love with a woman, and we went down to Bear Mountain Lodge. And on a lark, we talked to a real estate friend of mine down in Silver City and looked at some houses. And one of those houses was owned by an artist and sited by an artist. It was just amazing. It had a 180 view of all the mountains that surround Silver City. And my lady friend and I looked at that and we were like, oh my God. We were not planning on buying a house, and we saw that and we knew that we had to do that. And then a couple of years after that, we broke up, and in the breakup, I ended up with the house. So I have this presence down there, and as a single person, managing two houses is not a very practical thing. Maybe somewhere down the road, I may move down there more permanently. I love Ames. I have lots of friends here. It would be hard, but the climate and the community there, Silver City is a fascinating town. It's a college town. It has a huge arts community. It's a lovely place to be, and I've made some good friends there. So I would, if you've never been to Silver City, I'd highly recommend it.
But start with Bear Mountain Lodge.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you want a very welcoming place to stay, it's a little out of the way, but the people there that are wonderful. It's usually quite quiet. I mean, I don't know. I don't think there's more than like about 15 guest rooms at the whole place, and they know how to cook, and there's great trails, and you're not that far from town. There are two large wilderness areas nearby, and you're very close to trailheads for the Continental Divide Trail. So if you like doing outdoor stuff, it's there. And if you're more into the arts, boy, the arts district in Silver City is was a pretty vibrant place. I don't know how well it's going to hold up through, the fact that tourists aren't coming to Silver City. The whole business of art is, I'm sure many of you are aware, can be very precarious. And I have a number of friends down there that are gallery owners and small shop owners, and they're having a really tough time down there. They rely on people coming from, from Phoenix and Tucson and El Paso and Albuquerque, and they're not, people aren't coming. And of course, there's all kinds of other restrictions on business too.
That's like 7 hours from where I'm at. It's a long state.
It really is. I mean, if I leave Silver City, first thing in the morning, I can spend the night in Las Vegas. I could keep going a little further than that, but if you go further than that, there's not many places to stay.
Right.
But yeah, New Mexico with its rough topography, even if something's fairly, as the crow flies, might look like it's close, it's not, because you have to go over these various mountains.
Yeah, if you're taking the I-25, we're just east of, we're by Cimarron. So it's just south of Raton.
Okay,
And you got to go 60 miles that way.
yeah. I've actually only gone over the Raton Pass once, but normally, like when I get up north of Las Vegas, then I start heading out towards Clayton and then up into Oklahoma and Kansas.
Oh, okay.
How many hours from Ames are you guys?
I'm 14, so I do.
And I'm about 21.
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah, it's 3 days a drop. I usually take 3 days to get there.
yeah, I take 2.
And fortunately, I normally fly. Silver City has air service. And so I actually fly right into Grant County Airport, which is about a half hour from my house. Yeah, you don't have that luxury. There really isn't a commercial airport very close to you.
No, my husband flies a small plane, but I'm not into small planes. So I like driving. So I just drive up and I stop in North Platte and stay overnight. So
Yeah.
sometime I have to branch out and go in a new way.
Yeah. Well, we got bigger planes to go to Silver City now. They're 9-passenger.
Oh.
It's federally subsidized and mandated service. There's a national program for certain small towns, mostly in Alaska, that are guaranteed federal service. And Silver City is one of those places that's on that federal program. So there's flights to Albuquerque 2 or 3 times a day, and there's usually 1 flight a day to Phoenix.
Super cool. Cool.
Anybody else have any questions or want to visit with each other?
I need to drop off to make my husband dinner.
Alrighty. Well, bon appetit.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Glad you
having
could
this
fit.
program. This was
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
You're great. So you'll do the next run, right, Anna?
If it's Zoom, of course.
We're in.
I mean, I'll do the next one.
Anna, what is your specialty, Anna?
Oh, I'm a writer. I'm in the MFA program at Iowa State as a late in life student. So I'm working on a memoir right now. But I've been dabbling in poetry, so that's why I was really excited to listen to this tonight. So.
Well, that's great. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I'd love it if you could do one of these.
Oh, well, okay. Well, I'll talk to Jen.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome.
I like
Thanks,
how to-
Mark, and safe travels to Illinois.
Thank you very much, Kyle. Yeah, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that I can stay safe and we can accomplish what we need to. And I don't know, I'm probably going to have to go into quarantine when I get back here, you know?
Yeah, it's not a fun thing.
I know. Well, take care, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Mark, let me know how things go, if you would.
I will.
Deb.
Yeah, definitely.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Safe travels.
Thank you. Good night, Deb.